The tractor screamed like a dying animal as it lurched to a violent stop, nearly throwing me face-first into the steering wheel. 1 second I was cruising down the north row of my field, humming to myself and sipping lukewarm coffee from my chipped thermos, and the next, I'm choking on dust, cursing at the sky, and staring at the mangled mess of orange fiber optic cable wrapped around my undercarriage like some demon's spaghetti. I jumped down and stared at it, heart racing. I hadn't buried anything here. No utility flags, no notices, no signs. Just good old dirt until today. My mind raced between anger and confusion. Who the hell put fiber optic cables in my field without telling me? I tried yanking the cable free, but it wouldn't budge. It was buried deep, professionally buried. That's when I saw the tiny plastic tag hanging from it, marked with a serial number and a corporate logo I didn't recognize. I followed the cable with my eyes as it snaked through my field like a neon orange snake on a mission. That mission, apparently, was to ruin my morning, my equipment, and possibly my sanity. I whipped out my phone and started scrolling through county notices, permits, anything that would justify someone digging through my property. Not a single alert. No email. No letter. Nothing taped to my door. Nothing. Still fuming, I jogged up to my barn office and pulled the footage from my security cameras, which I had installed last year after someone tried to steal my chicken coop. And there it was, 2 unmarked white trucks pulling up at the break of dawn 3 days ago, guys in reflective vests jumping out like Navy SEALs on a caffeine bender. They didn't knock. They didn't hesitate. They just started digging. Clean, fast, like they knew they weren't supposed to be there. I watched, mouth open, as they tunneled right across my field, laid down spools of cable, and buried them without so much as a raised eyebrow. Of course, I did what any sane landowner would do in 2025. I called my buddy Randy. Randy's the kind of guy who keeps a bug-out bag in his truck and swears the pigeons are government drones. But sometimes, he's weirdly useful. He came over with a flashlight, a folding chair, and a bag of beef jerky, sat beside the cable with me like we were waiting for it to confess something. "I bet it's the NSA," he said, chewing thoughtfully. "Or the HOA. Honestly, I trust the government more than I trust the HOA." I laughed until he said that. Then I stopped. The HOA. Our local HOA had gotten bolder over the last few years. They'd started managing more than they should, easements, trash collection, even the Wi-Fi contract for the neighborhood. It had been creeping closer and closer to my property line, like a bad rash. I didn't live under HOA rules. I was outside their jurisdiction, but they never liked that. I was the one unregulated patch of freedom they couldn't control. Could it really be them? As if summoned by my irritation, Karen, the HOA president in all her clipboard-wielding glory, rolled up in a black SUV like she was on a diplomatic mission. She stepped out with that practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that said, "I'm about to ruin your life, but I'm going to pretend we're friends." "Oh good, you found the installation," she chirped, as if I'd stumbled across a surprise gift. "What installation?" I growled. "You mean the one that wrecked my tractor and is trespassing across my land?" "Well, technically, it's a community project," she said, flipping through her notes. "We voted on expanding high-speed internet. It's for the greater good." "You voted?" I blinked. "Karen, this is my field. I own this land. You don't get to vote on my property." She waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "You weren't using it. It's a field. It's not a spare bedroom. It's not up for grabs just because it's got open space." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Let's be reasonable here. You're the only property the line could pass through to reach the main road. We assumed you'd be fine with it. It's not like we built a house on it. I'm about to build a lawsuit on it." She smirked. "If you want to get legal, you'll find this was all done above board." But I knew a bluff when I heard one. That night, I stayed up with Lydia, my cousin and part-time land use attorney who treats zoning laws like sport. She scoured the filings and grinned like a wolf. "No permit. No right-of-way. No agreement. They'd gone rogue. It gets better, way better. The HOA hadn't just laid cable through my property. They'd partnered with a local internet service provider and leased access rights to them, as if they owned the land. They were getting paid a monthly fee for that access. They were profiting from my field, my soil, my land, and didn't give me a single cent. They had illegally sold access to property they didn't own, like squatters renting out a mansion they broke into. I stared at the documents in disbelief. They didn't just lay cable. They turned my land into a revenue stream and thought I wouldn't notice. Karen and her board had crossed a line so bold, so blatantly stupid, that I couldn't decide whether to scream or laugh. Instead, I smiled. Slowly. Wickedly. If they thought laying cable was a power move, they were about to learn what real power looked like. They gave me a fiber optic line? Fine. I'd take control of it, and then I'd lease it to their biggest competitor. This wasn't war yet, but it was about to be. The next morning, I walked out to the field with a new attitude and a thermos full of fresh coffee, this time stronger, darker, and ready for war. The orange cable lay under the dirt like a vein of arrogance, and now that I knew what it was worth, I didn't see a nuisance. I saw leverage. Real, legal, juicy leverage. And Karen? Karen had absolutely no idea the kind of game she had just started. Most people see a field and think empty land. I saw a chessboard, and I was about to move my queen. Lydia had worked fast. By sunrise, she already had the county's utility office on the line and confirmed what we suspected. No permit, no permission, no survey filed. The HOA had skipped every step of the legal process and relied on good old-fashioned entitlement and assumed compliance. Classic Karen move. But the kicker? Since no easement was recorded and no compensation given, the line was technically an unauthorized utility encroachment, which meant I had every right to either remove it or monetize it myself. I sent Karen a polite, carefully worded email. Said I was open to working together and willing to resolve the misunderstanding peacefully. I offered to hear her side before escalating things. That was bait, and she swallowed it faster than a HOA board member at an open bar. She replied within the hour, practically congratulating herself for convincing me. She even attached an email thread with the ISP detailing their deal. According to her, I was a reasonable landowner who understood the needs of the greater community. Oh, I understood, all right. I understood that she had just handed me a full confession and a paper trail. While Lydia began drafting the initial cease and desist letter, I got to work in the field. Literally. I bought a dozen bright yellow flags and marked every spot where their cable ran through my land. Then I added wooden signs. Private property, unauthorized utility use will be prosecuted. A few had QR codes linking directly to a public post I'd made detailing the incident, complete with photos, security footage, and a side-by-side of Karen smiling at the installation like she was opening a community garden instead of committing real estate fraud. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Bryce, my neighbor down the road. We used to ride dirt bikes through the hills as kids, but he'd moved away to start a tech company. Turns out he'd come back to start something even bigger. His own local fiber company. Lightning Link Fiber. He'd been trying to expand in our area for months but couldn't get access through HOA-managed properties because of their exclusive ISP contract. Bryce had seen my post, and he was laughing so hard when he called. He could barely talk. "I've been trying to get a foot in that neighborhood for a year," he said. "And you just bulldozed a back door with your tractor." I explained what was going on and asked a simple question. If you had legal access to run lines through my land, would you be able to hook up the entire neighborhood with better speeds and lower prices? His answer was instant. Hell yes. And just like that, we had a deal. Lydia drew up the paperwork. Bryce's crew would run parallel fiber on my property, legally this time, and I'd lease the land to them at a fair rate. He'd install a junction box right on the edge of my field that could service the entire HOA-covered neighborhood. Not only that, he'd undercut the HOA's ISP by offering triple the speed at half the price, no contracts, no throttling, no HOA markup. I called it Operation Steal the Signal, and it was already my favorite side project ever. Meanwhile, Karen was starting to sweat. I could tell because she sent me another email, this one noticeably less smug. She asked for a formal sit-down to discuss mutual benefits. Translation: the board was realizing how badly they'd messed up and wanted to patch things up before the neighborhood caught wind of the scheme. Too late. Bryce and I launched a local flyer campaign. Bright blue mailers hit every door with big bold letters. Better internet. No HOA markups. Coming soon. A few neighbors even called me directly, thanking me for finally doing something about the price hikes. One said he'd been paying more than $100 a month for spotty service and had no idea the HOA was pocketing a cut. I started receiving passive-aggressive notes taped to my mailbox. One read, "Your actions affect the whole community." Another just said, "Traitor," in red marker. I wasn't sure if that one was from Karen or Randy trying to mess with me. Either way, it only made me double down. A week after the signs went up, I caught Karen and 2 HOA board members sneaking onto my property. They were dressed like they were going birdwatching, but they were clearly inspecting the cable route. I stepped out with my phone in hand and filmed the whole thing. "Private property," I called out. "Trespassing is a criminal offense. Should I call the sheriff or just post this on Nextdoor?" Karen turned red. The others backed off immediately, muttering something about getting their steps in. "You can't just hijack our infrastructure," she hissed. "Your infrastructure?" I raised an eyebrow. "You laid it illegally on my land. I own the dirt, the rights, and now, thanks to you, the leverage." She blustered something about lawyers and lawsuit. I shrugged. "Bring it. I already have an attorney. You might want to find one who knows the difference between public easements and private land." Later that night, I got a call from someone even higher up, the regional manager of the ISP the HOA had partnered with. He was very calm, very professional, and very, very nervous. He asked if we could come to an agreement, suggested a new contract, maybe even a revenue share. I politely declined. "You're leasing space from people who don't own it," I said. "That makes the entire agreement invalid." He tried to argue. I offered him a deal. Lease it from me instead, at a higher price, of course, or rip it all out. He said he'd get back to me. I hung up and poured myself a whiskey. Then I stepped out onto my porch, looked out over the moonlit field, and smiled. The HOA thought they could steal my land and turn a profit. But they didn't realize something crucial. This field wasn't just dirt. It was mine. Every inch, every rock, every stubborn patch of grass. And now it was a battleground. Only this time, I wasn't the one caught by surprise. I was the one laying cable. The kind that carried data, dollars, and revenge. Karen's smile had disappeared. That alone was satisfying, but what came next was pure chaos, and I was there for every minute of it. The moment our flyers started hitting mailboxes, the HOA's control over the neighborhood cracked like a frozen pipe in January. Suddenly, their so-called exclusive provider deal wasn't exclusive anymore, and the residents, who had been quietly grumbling about slow speeds and hidden fees, now had a choice. And nothing terrifies a power-hungry HOA more than giving people options. The first ripple came in the form of mass complaints. Neighbors started showing up to HOA meetings, waving the blue flyers like torches. One guy, Jeff, who had been living there for 12 years, stormed in demanding to know why the HOA had never disclosed the kickbacks from the ISP. Karen tried to explain that it was a community benefit fund, but the moment Jeff asked for financial records, she shut that meeting down faster than you can say class action lawsuit. Meanwhile, Bryce's crew worked fast. They laid new cable across my field legally and efficiently, with all the right permits and inspections. They even installed the main hub just 10 feet from the illegal line the HOA had placed, like a shiny new monument to poetic justice. Neighbors started switching to Lightning Link by the dozen. Each one got a free install, a referral bonus, and an email explaining exactly how the HOA had overcharged them for years. Karen's inbox must have looked like a war zone. Then came the sabotage. At first, it was little things. Someone knocked over our promotional sign near the mailbox row. Another day, someone left a pile of dog poop on Bryce's equipment trailer. Then one night, someone snuck onto my field and tried to dig up part of the Lightning Link trench. Didn't get far before triggering the motion-activated sprinklers I'd installed specifically for Karen-style shenanigans. I reviewed the footage with Lydia, and we both burst out laughing when we saw a hooded figure get blasted right in the face and fall flat into the mud. That clip went viral in the neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't even post it, someone else did. The comments section turned into a war zone of its own, with residents choosing sides faster than middle school clique. But the most delicious twist came from within the HOA itself. Turns out, not every board member was on board with Karen's little stunt. One of them, a mild-mannered retiree named Greg, cracked under pressure and sent me an anonymous email with all the juicy internal documents. Meeting minutes, ISP invoices, even a breakdown of how much money the HOA had made off the illegal cable deal. Spoiler, it was tens of thousands of dollars. And none of it had been disclosed to the resident. I knew exactly what to do with that information. I made a website. Nothing fancy, just a clean layout titled Karengate, the fiber scandal. I uploaded every document, photo, and video I had, including a timeline and annotated maps of my land. It was factual, it was damning, and it went viral in under 24 hours. Residents were furious. Some wanted refunds. Others wanted Karen fired. A few wanted to string her up in the community gazebo with fiber optic cables. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, it looked more like a protest rally. Karen tried to maintain control, but she looked like a substitute teacher on the last day of school. People were shouting. Greg resigned on the spot. Another board member followed. Karen slammed her gavel so hard it broke, then stormed out mid-meeting to the sound of sarcastic applause. But the drama wasn't over. A few days later, a black SUV pulled into my driveway, and out stepped two men in suit. I thought maybe Karen had finally sent backup, but these guys were from the ISP, the original one the HOA had leased to. They weren't hostile, but they weren't exactly friendly either. They introduced themselves and asked if we could talk. I invited them into the barn office and poured them coffee that I deliberately made too strong. They got straight to the point. Their company was concerned. Their equipment was now sitting on unauthorized land. Technically, I could sue them for trespassing or worse, file an injunction to have the lines removed. That would kill service for 100 households and create a PR nightmare. I nodded, pretending to consider their plight. Then I laid out my offer. I'd allow their lines to stay temporarily, under the condition that they terminate their contract with the HOA, acknowledge their mistake, and renegotiate access rights directly with me. And the new rate? Let's just say it included enough zeros to pay for a new tractor, some land improvements, and a generous inconvenience fee. They tried to lowball me. I reminded them I had every legal right to cut the line tomorrow if I wanted. And, just to drive the point home, I walked them out to the field, pointed at the illegal splice box and said, "That thing? 1 shovel and 20 minutes, it's gone." They didn't argue after that. Later that week, the new deal was signed. I was now officially leasing my land to 2 ISPs. One old, one new, and I was making more per month than I ever had selling hay. Bryce was thrilled. He even offered me an advisory title in his company, which I accepted mostly so I could put Fiber Mogul on my business cards. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling. With the board collapsing, the residents rebelling, and her internet monopoly gone, she was grasping for straws. She filed a noise complaint against the installation crew. claimed the new fiber junction box, clashed with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. At one point, she even accused me of hosting an illegal data center in my barn. I posted a video tour of my data center, which was just a few servers and a router duct-taped to the wall next to my chicken feed. The comments section exploded with memes, including one where someone photoshopped Karen onto a medieval inquisitor chasing a Wi-Fi signal with a torch. That week, I held a neighborhood open house in my field. Free snacks, lemonade, a tour of the new hub station, and Bryce gave a presentation on how internet actually works. Families showed up with lawn chairs. Kids ran around chasing each other with printed-out Lightning Link versus HOA flags. One guy even wore a shirt that said, "Plow the system." As the sun set, I looked out over the field and realized something. I hadn't just protected my land. I'd changed the entire dynamic of the community. People had choices now. They had information. And best of all, they had each other. Karen had ruled with secrets and fine print. I just used a tractor and a little transparency. Of course, I wasn't naive. I knew Karen wasn't done yet. People like her don't go quietly. But for now, the board was in shambles, the lines were legally mine, and the neighborhood was connected like never before. All because someone laid the wrong cable in the wrong field. Karen filed the lawsuit like it was her final move in a chess game she thought she was still winning. The official paperwork came in a thick envelope delivered by a man who looked far too tired to care what was inside. I opened it on the porch with Lydia watching over my shoulder, and within seconds she let out a laugh so sharp it made the chickens scatter. The HOA was suing me for obstruction, unauthorized business activity, and, my personal favorite, willful disruption of community agreements. The best part? They listed my field as common access land, like they could just declare it theirs by typing it into a Word doc. Lydia poured herself a celebratory lemonade and got to work. She prepped the countersuit like it was a holiday project. By the time she was done, we had a portfolio of violations so thick it needed its own drawer. Trespassing, fraud, civil misuse of property, even tax evasion since the HOA had never declared the fiber lease income properly. And with Greg's whistleblower emails and Bryce's technical schematics backing us up, our evidence wasn't just solid, it was bulletproof. The courtroom was exactly what I imagined it would be. Fluorescent lights, one sleepy bailiff, and the smell of overbrewed coffee hanging in the air like regret. Karen showed up in a tailored blazer 2 sizes too tight, flanked by 2 nervous board members and an attorney who looked like he had just Googled, "How to HOA lawsuit." I could barely keep a straight face when he started his opening statement, trying to paint me as an uncooperative landowner who jeopardized the neighborhood's connectivity. He even called the cable installation a community enhancement initiative, which I think he expected to sound noble but only made the judge raise an eyebrow. Then Lydia stood up. She went through everything, step by step. The lack of permit filings, the unauthorized dig, the secret ISP contract, the illegal profit scheme. She presented aerial photos, timestamps, soil reports. At one point she even brought out a printed map with red yarn like she was presenting a true crime documentary. The judge, who had clearly expected this to be a petty dispute, sat up straighter with every minute. Then came the kicker. We played the video footage of the HOA crew laying the cables in the early morning hours, cutting across my field like burglars in reflective vests. We showed the email where Karen admitted to the installation and discussed profits from the ISP. We even presented the screenshots of the public backlash and the site visits from the unamused ISP reps. The judge looked at Karen and asked, "Did you, at any point, consult the property owner before initiating this project?" Karen fumbled. We assumed community interest overrode individual land claims in this instance. The judge blinked. That's not how land ownership works. With a simple ruling, the entire case flipped. The judge dismissed the HOA's claims entirely and granted my countersuit full standing. Not only were they ordered to pay damages for unauthorized use of my land, but they were also hit with fines for misappropriation and breach of fiduciary duty. The icing on the cake? The HOA was forced to formally terminate its contract with the ISP, which automatically voided their revenue stream. Karen's face when she heard the word restitution was something I wish I could have framed. After court, Bryce and I celebrated with tacos from the gas station nearby. Odd choice, but strangely perfect. He was already drafting plans to expand service into other HOA-strangled neighborhoods, and with my case now a matter of public record, word spread fast. I started getting calls from other property owners, asking how they could do what I did. It felt like I had accidentally become the fiber optic Robin Hood. But Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. A few days after the ruling, she filed a nuisance report with the county, claiming that the new Lightning Link junction box was a health hazard. Apparently, it gave off dangerous electromagnetic waves that interfered with birds' migration patterns and caused her neighbor's dog to bark more than usual. The county inspector came out, took one look, and asked if we were pranking him. When I showed him the signed permits and the new partnership with the local utility company, he chuckled and gave me a thumbs up. Karen then tried to rally the remaining board members, those who hadn't quit or gone into hiding, and called for an emergency HOA meeting. It was held in the community center, and Bryce and I attended purely out of morbid curiosity. About 20 residents showed up, some carrying lawn chairs, others wearing shirts that said, "Free the Fiber." Karen stood at the front with a whiteboard full of poorly drawn diagrams and an emotional plea about restoring order to the community. That's when someone, Jeff of all people, stood up and asked her directly, "Karen, how much money did the HOA make from that illegal deal?" Karen froze. Someone else shouted, "Where's the money now?" And then, like a wave breaking, the room erupted in questions. Karen tried to maintain control, but the whiteboard was smudged, her markers dried up, and her voice trembled. By the end of the night, someone had formally called for a vote to remove her as HOA president. The motion passed unanimously. She left the building without another word. With Karen out, a new board was formed. Greg returned, this time as treasurer. Jeff took over communications, and surprisingly, I was asked to be an advisor. Not because I was particularly diplomatic, but because everyone figured I'd spot a scam a mile away. I accepted, but only on the condition that all major infrastructure decisions would be publicly voted on, and no project could be initiated without property owner consent. But the final twist came from Bryce. With his company growing and my field now a major hub, he proposed installing a permanent solar-powered microstation right on my property. It would serve not just the HOA neighborhood but 3 others nearby, turning my land into the epicenter of independent internet service in the region. I'd get equity, ongoing revenue, and a seat on the company's advisory board. We broke ground 2 weeks later. Karen, now a former resident, had moved out. Rumor said she sold her house at a loss to a young couple who immediately installed lawn gnomes and renamed their Wi-Fi network to HOA_who. As I stood out in the field watching the new microhub rise, I realized how much had changed. This wasn't just about cables anymore. It was about ownership, about standing your ground when someone tries to walk over it. Literally. The same dirt that Karen once dismissed as just a field was now a revenue-generating tech asset that served hundreds of homes. And the people who lived there? They remembered. They supported it. They celebrated it. It had started with a single cable. A mistake they thought I wouldn't notice. A trespass they figured they could justify. But I noticed. I cared. And I pushed back. Not with fists or fury, but with paperwork, persistence, and a really well-timed tractor breakdown. And in the end, I didn't just take back control. I became the network. The sky was streaked with orange and gold as the last cable was laid into the microstation, the crew packing up their tools while neighbors gathered around with folding chairs, coolers, and curiosity. A year ago, no one would have believed that a quiet farming field would become the heart of the region's fastest internet. And certainly not because the HOA tried to sneak a cable through it. But there we were, standing on what used to be just dirt and weeds, now transformed into something valuable, respected, and undeniably mine. It felt like the whole neighborhood had shown up for the unofficial launch party. Kids ran past the new solar hub, some trying to name it like it was a pet. One girl suggested calling it Freedom Tower, which got a surprisingly loud cheer from the crowd. Jeff was handing out burgers. Greg set up a little podium to say a few words, and Bryce wheeled in a portable projector for a short slideshow that included, among other things, a freeze frame of Karen getting sprayed by my motion-activated sprinklers during her nighttime sabotage attempt. That part got a standing ovation. After everything we'd been through, the mood was light, celebratory. But beneath the laughter and hot dogs, there was a sense of closure, like the neighborhood had finally cut its last tie to the paranoia, micromanagement, and backdoor deals that had once ruled over it. People weren't just happy about faster internet. They were happy about freedom, about choice, about being heard, and about the very satisfying downfall of an overreaching HOA board that thought they could act without consequence. Someone asked me to say a few words. I didn't plan on speaking, but I figured why not? I stepped up, cleared my throat, and looked out at the people gathered there. Most of them I didn't know very well before all this. Now we shared something, a strange battle fought with routers and legal briefs instead of pitchforks and torches. I kept it simple. I told them how it started with a busted tractor, how I found that orange cable buried in my soil, how I watched strangers dig into my land like it belonged to them. I reminded them that it wasn't about the cable, it was about the principle. About someone assuming they had the right to make decisions on my behalf, about my property, without ever asking. And how when people try to take without asking, when they profit off of what doesn't belong to them, someone has to stand up and say, "Not this time." I ended it by thanking them for showing up, for speaking out, for proving that the best way to shut down entitlement is with unity and a little bit of stubbornness. After the speech, people came up to shake my hand, share stories, and laugh about how ridiculous it had all gotten. One older woman told me she used to be afraid to speak at HOA meetings, but after watching how everything played out, she finally felt like her voice mattered. Another guy asked me if I'd ever thought about running for office. I nearly choked on my lemonade. The next day, I took a walk around the property just as the sun was coming up. The new hub stood quietly in the distance, humming like a content machine with nothing left to prove. The field looked peaceful again. No more trenches, no more markers, no more unauthorized trucks sneaking in before dawn. Just my land, my rules, and a fiber backbone humming beneath the surface like buried lightning. I passed by the old route where the illegal cable had once run. We left it in the ground for legal reasons. Let it rot as a monument to hubris. The sign next to it now said, "Caution, former HOA ego zone." Someone had added a drawing of Karen's face to it in Sharpie. I didn't erase it. I heard from Lydia a few days later. She said the final settlement checks had cleared. The HOA had paid out the court-ordered damages, though it took liquidating some of their emergency fund and canceling a handful of pet projects that apparently included a marble fountain for the clubhouse. Karen, unsurprisingly, had vanished. Word was she moved across town and tried to join another HOA, but after someone forwarded them a link to the Karen Gate site, her application mysteriously got delayed indefinitely. Her old house? Sold to a young couple who installed a skate ramp in the driveway and a massive inflatable flamingo in the front yard. The new Wi-Fi network name was cable_crisis_avoided. I sent them a welcome basket. Bryce's business exploded. With our victory as a flagship story, Lightning Link began partnering with other landowners, bypassing greedy HOAs and corporate monopolies all across the state. They even offered me a formal advisory role, along with a generous slice of ownership. I turned my barn office into a half-time operations hub, half-time storage unit for local kids' science projects. The fiber-powered chicken cam was a huge hit. People started calling me the cable cowboy, which was ridiculous, but also secretly awesome. I leaned into it more than I should have. Lydia sent me a belt buckle with a little router on it. I wore it to the next neighborhood block party. There was a deeper lesson under all of it, one that stuck with me. Entitlement comes in many forms. Sometimes it wears a business suit and sometimes it carries a clipboard. Sometimes it shows up at your doorstep with polite words and a smile. But it always has the same signature. It takes without asking. And it assumes you won't fight back. But when you do, when you call it out and shine a light on it, it shrinks fast. And once people see it for what it is, they don't forget. They rally. They take their power back. The field is quieter now. No more drama. No more battles. Just the soft hum of wind through the grass and the invisible pulse of data moving through lines I own, on land I fought for. Every time I walk past that microstation, I think about how close they came to getting away with it. How a single oversight, a single missed opportunity to speak up, would have let them win. But they didn't. Because I said no. Because I stood my ground. And because someone tried to bury their greed in my dirt, and forgot I was still the one holding the shovel.